You're listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hello, my name is Uwe Schulte, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our podcast series, Let's Talk Sustainable Business. The series is brought to you by the Conference Board Global Sustainability Center. Today, I will be talking to Thomas Udesen, Chief Procurement Officer at Bayer. Please let me introduce now our guest for today. Thomas, after several years in timber trading from Asia, had a procurement career at Johnson & Johnson, which led him to become the CPO EMEA in 2010. Thomas is now the CPO of Bayer for almost 8 years. He's also a steering committee member of the Chemicals Industry Initiative Together for Sustainability and a co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. Thomas holds an MBA from Cranfield School of Management. Welcome, Thomas. Please tell us a bit about yourself and how sustainability has entered your professional life.
So, Uwe, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm very, very thrilled to talk to you and, of course, to all the listeners. So, yes, sustainability and my life, I guess, through, as you described, my career, I have been always living very closely with the topic of sustainable growth and how does modern industry potentially have a positive or not positive impact on societies across the world. And you mentioned timber trading was really my formative years back in the 90s. I was working in Ghana, I was working in Indonesia, and of course through that had access and visibility to things that were done in the right way, but also I did see when things were not really working in the right way. And that, of course, gave me a lot of opinions around how should business be conducting as it moved forward. And then I had the pleasure of joining J&J, was sitting in with the team, the EMEA team, and that was really at a time where topics like palm oil, we all remember the Kit Kat campaign, were featuring, and I had the pleasure of also becoming part of the work that Unilever, as you may remember, was setting up in terms of the Palm Oil Alliance, the RSPO. You know, that whole wave got me very much involved. And then, of course, with Bayer being a large multinational, also with a lot of legacy in more heavy industry, chemistry, etc., it has just been a natural progression for me as well. So that's probably how I ended up here. I do have a total firm belief that we as industry, as business, as society, need to protect what is here to protect us. So the whole notion of sustainability, people, planet, combining also with profit is really something that I'm a strong advocate for.
Yeah, that's quite an impressive past you have there, especially the timber trading intrigues me. But let's look at the present. Most of our audience, of course, heard about Bayer, but could you highlight a little bit what the company is doing today?
Yes, so through a series of organizational changes over the last decades, we are a life science company that is organized in 3 divisions. We have the pharmaceuticals division, we have our crop science division, and then we have our consumer health division. And it's a company of 100,000 plus employees. It's based in Germany. We have a strong history. It's been around for 54 years by now. So of course, one of the real foundational pillars of German industry, but also one of the leading dimensions when it comes to the life science. The mission of our company is health for all, hunger for none. So again, we are in human health, and also how do we make sure we have sufficient nourishment and food available.
Yeah, but I think we all know that you guys have gone through major demergers and a widely as well discussed acquisition. Can you describe that journey very briefly?
Yes. So again, if you go maybe 10 years back in time, Bayer was a company that also had activities in things like rubber, things in plastics, there was the pharmaceuticals, etc. And a very conscious choice was made to really focus on life science. And that led to the divestiture of the rubber business, so what many will know as Lanxess, the API business, Saltigo. We had the plastics business, polyurethane polycarbonate, which is today Covestro. We engaged ourselves with the animal health business, which is in Elanco, and we had the big acquisition that you mentioned, the Monsanto company, also a couple of years back, as well as the over-the-counter consumer health business for Merck. So it's been I would say 5, 6, 7 years of constant change, which is now where we have landed. We are in, again, human health and crop science, making sure we have food, and that's really where we feel we also should be.
Yeah, you already stated that vision, health for all and hunger for none. That is fairly generic. It's a nice one to go for, of course, but can you tell a bit more detail what that actually means?
Well, I think as society, and I'm sure all the audience will agree with that, we are having growing populations. It looks as if we will move towards 10 billion. That, of course, puts a lot of stress on our society. How do we keep people healthy and have a long, healthy life at an affordable cost? So a lot around new technologies. We've just gone through COVID, which again, of course, shows the vulnerability that we have as society. And we are of the firm belief that solutions for our healthcare needs to be found through science, of which there is a lot going on, and some really promising prospects that we saw with the speed also with the COVID vaccination. So that's the health part. But at the same time, if we want to make sure that people have enough to eat, we need to also become much better at using the land that we have to increase the food production, increase the yield. None of us would like to see that we continue to take over more forestry land, or in a way make sure that the growth of the population has a detrimental impact on nature around us. And that can only, we believe, happen through different ways of looking at industrial agriculture and making sure that there are new technologies possible to increase yield at, preferably even reduced space. Climate change has already had quite an impact, where we see that the land mass anyhow is being reduced year on year. Also, that drought continues to be a real challenge. So we have, with our focus again, health and food, we are really at the center of the human challenge in the next decades, and that of course is what drives all of us. That's actually what makes it a very purposeful place to work as well, and sustainability in our operations and our supply chains, which is where I and the team of procurement come in. This, of course, what we have a huge role to play.
It's very tempting to dive deeper into that whole area of regenerative agriculture and all of that, but let's not do that now, because our focus is procurement, of course, for the discussion when we have the privilege to talk to a chief procurement officer. So that transition we've just talked about, that is a huge thing. Yeah, you get rid of certain parts of your business, you focus the business around a very clearly structured profile. How did that be incorporated or carried out through procurement? What influence did that have on procurement, and how did procurement have an influence on the process?
Yeah, I think for any portfolio changes, whether it's an acquisition, a licensing deal, or divestiture, procurement is in from the very beginning. So almost at the ideation point, because there is a whole degree of due diligence that needs to be taken place that we are involved in. But when it comes to our divestitures, these are, of course, people that we know. These are our colleagues. These are great businesses that we believe would be better served actually under a different ownership. So a lot of our focus is how do we make sure that these businesses continue to be successful, and that we can make sure that our colleagues, find a new home either as a standalone, as we saw with Covestro, where they can create their own identity, or as part of another company, as we saw with the animal health with Elanco. So it's making sure that all these transactional aspects, and specifically for procurement, of course, this is along with contracting, with transparency. How do we make sure that the practices of the past are being put into place, that systems are recreated, that purchase orders are transferred? These are very, very large and complex processes, and we have a dedicated team that is really making sure that all these portfolio changes are made in a way that the future home of our colleagues is also one that's likely to make them successful.
You now talked about this really important part when you say goodbye to people that you know and also portfolios you know that have given you scale in some aspect, but also the acquisition is of course a big challenge, because you know, as far as I recall from my past, the first thing is that everybody turns around to procurement and says, where are the savings?
Yeah, I mean, the topic of synergies is of course a big topic in any acquisition, and here, you know, there are different ways that you assess that during the due diligence. And then after the deal has been made, and that's the same with us, we typically create clean rooms where dedicated people, you know, are being put into the clean room and making sure that they are able to assess, you know, what is it that you can do as and when that the deals are approved by the relevant authorities. And of course, that's what we have done with all of these things. People are being dedicated, knowing that, of course, if the deal doesn't go through, they can't go back to their procurement jobs of the past. So making sure that that is done in the right way, that's step one. But then when people have all the data, we can see where do we have overlap, where can we do things better. We have category strategies that will define what we should be doing with whom, and you can do a bit of a gap analysis and try to put more concrete ideas behind the opportunities that you assumed in the very beginning. And that's what we did with the Merck OTC, but also with the Monsanto acquisition. Get those teams so that when day one happens, the curtain is lifted, that we have teams ready to take those work packages and start to pick up the phone, make sure that the synergies can be delivered. And then the heavy work of integrating systems, integrating contracts, working on the cultural dimensions that will always follow when two cultures are coming together. And that's what we've been working on also in our team.
When you talk about cultures coming together, and I think in every merger, that is the biggest challenge, of course. Our theme is sustainability here. So obviously two sustainability cultures were coming together in the case of Monsanto. What was the role of the procurement in that, finding the common ground on sustainability?
Yeah, I think the every organization, every team has something that they are amazingly good at, and that has been the primary focus of their existence, and that's what we also recognize. So our approach was really to sit down and compare practices very early. In fact, when the legal boundaries also allowed for that to happen, and what we found out was that particularly in Monsanto, they had a very, very advanced approach when it comes to topics like supplier diversity, inclusion on small, medium-sized enterprises, where they had a lot of active programs, both in the States, but certainly also in Latin America. So that was an area where there was a lot of advancement. Same with seeds. You know, how do you engage with growers to make sure that they are educated and that there is capacity building so that children, you know, go to school rather than going into the field. So those were aspects that we took along from the Monsanto procurement practices. Bayer, and I think maybe also through this strong legacy of chemistry, had very, very mature practices when it came to topics like energy conservation, process optimization, supplier engagement around Together for Sustainability, industry collaboration. And that's what we then brought in here. And it was really in the mixture of those two practices that we have then also defined what is our path forward. And we have, of course, in the last couple of years done a lot. We have updated our supplier code of conduct. We have made very bold commitments when it comes to sustainability in general. including science-based target initiatives, commitments on CO2 reduction, human rights, etc. And that's what we have agreed that we want to focus on in the sort of time frame towards 2030, and now it's rolling up the sleeves and get on with it and deliver on those commitments that we have made to society at large.
Yeah, we have discussed that aspect now. It is clear that we will not dive into the controversy of legal things around the Monsanto acquisition. That is for experts to discuss. We're talking about sustainability here. So, and I understand that you guys have developed 3 lines of engagement for sustainability, and I'm very interested how that relates to procurement people in Bayer now.
Yeah, I think there is, what is it that we want to focus on as procurement internally in our organization, and how do we engage with our suppliers? So a lot of it has been around, let's say, the first line of defense, which is of course our code of conduct, where you will see all our expectations have been very clearly outlined, much of which is built on the United Nations Global Compact principles. It's of course having all the dimensions around CO2 reduction. It's got the human rights. It's got responsible care around water consumption, energy, etc. So that's the minimum expectations, and we have been very clear to our suppliers as well that if you are not able to commit to this, we will start sort of a more detailed dialogue where potentially we will have to walk away, because that is really minimum. But one thing is, how do you actually make sure that this is happening? And that's where we have assessment programs, we have audit programs, we have these principles reflected in all our contracting. We make sure that it's part of our tenders as a significant portion of the decision making. So that's the first line, if you will. How do we make sure that Bayer and all our practices are hardwired and executed against? The second level here is around industry collaboration, because the topic of sustainability is so enormous and complex that any company, in a way, assuming that they can do this on their own, I think is on a wrong path. And we figured that out already a decade ago. So in 2011, Bayer created 2 industry initiatives, Together for Sustainability, that you talked about, the chemical industry, as well as the PSCI, so the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative. And the idea behind both of those is that we should not duplicate things like assessment and audits, because these suppliers, who often serve multiple players, multiple customers, will end up filling in questionnaires which all have a little bit of variability rather than actually fixing the problems that they have. So we have standardized, we have agreed on templates. There is a mutual recognition that one audit for one is an audit for all. And with that, we have been able to dramatically reduce the documentation requirement for our suppliers and start focusing on implementation. And that initiative, TFS specifically, started with 6 companies 10 years ago. We are now 37 members. The most recent Lenzing joined from Austria. We have the first Japanese company, Mitsui & Co. We have Chinese, etc. So we represent more than 500 billion of sales. We have 17,500 assessments conducted in this forum. So we believe strongly that partnership, doing things together in a pre-competitive domain, making sure obviously that all the antitrust requirements are respected, but that is the way forward. And we would advocate for anybody who is not yet in a industry group around sustainability that they should find some friends really quickly and find ways of moving forward together. There's this African proverb, I think you've heard it, but again, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And that's the whole philosophy around how do we change our supply chains. The third dimension is around individual engagement, and that's where people are encouraged to do community activities and also educate themselves when it comes to sustainable procurement. So you mentioned Sustainable Procurement Pledge. This is, of course, one domain where people have a chance to educate themselves. become part of communities that care and who also wants to make sure that the knowledge of how do I actually do things differently is then also distributed from a peer-to-peer. Role models are seen, and that's what it is. So we do 3 lines. It's the company, it's the industry, and it's the individual in our organization.
That requires a little bit more discussion, I guess. So one of the big challenges in a context like that, and I speak from experience, of course, as you know, AIM Progress is a similar thing, and my friend and I created that initiative at the time, and now the challenge really is to come out of the compliance mode into the mode where we actually have a positive impact, and let's talk about that a little bit more. And also let's talk about this wonderful pledge of yours that is very interesting, I think, for a lot of our audience. But unfortunately, time flies, and
Wow.
we've come to an end of this episode. So I'm looking forward to talk to you in a couple of weeks again. And then we'll go deeper on those subjects, if that is okay with you.
That is absolutely okay. And Uwe, you know, I always enjoy our conversations. I appreciate you have a strong passion for the topic of sustainability. So there is so much for us to do and so little time. So in a few weeks, I think that's okay. I will look forward to that conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. To our audience, if you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to our podcast series or explore the entire catalog of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. You can also write to us at sustainability@tcb.org, and we will be very happy to receive your feedback. Thanks for listening, and please join us again in 2 weeks' time. For now, goodbye.
That was Let's Talk Sustainable Business.